Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the best factions to start with for new players. This video is for new players looking to start Infinity and pick up a faction, or for new players looking to switch gears from a faction they're already in, maybe wanting to try something new. This video is also great for veteran players, if you've got new players around you asking for suggestions, for questions with what they should play. And what we're going to do in this video is take a look at each major faction, get an understanding of what their vibe is, and then take a look at a starting sectorial that's going to be pretty new player friendly for each of those major factions. So, without further ado, let's get started. First up, we've got PanO, also known as PanOceania. They're the inheritance of the Western powers, sort of based out of Australia, and are one of the two major superpowers in the Infinity universe. They excel in direct gunfighting and a very direct play style, and they have high-tech weapons and equipment to support that gunfighting, trying to get those shots to go through and really hurt when they land. They're home to some of the most effective tags, or kind of mech units, in the game, but can generally suffer in terms of vision control, which can hamper a bit of their movement, and they suffer somewhat in objective play with lower quality specialists and do struggle to reach those objectives sometimes if they can't just shoot their way out of their deployment zone. For a good starting sectorial, I recommend Svalheima Winter Force, or just Svalheima. They've got a very effective and simple direct game plan, where they have units that are quite good at shooting, they have quite good visual mods, they're going to land those hits, and those hits are really going to hurt. But aside from that, they can most effectively capitalize on those successful ranged engagements, which other factions can struggle to capitalize on. Svalheima has very good close assault units. You can see Shona Karana with her big sword there, who can run into the enemy once those heads are down, and really make the most of those opportunities you get as a PanOceanian player, getting those heads down quickly. They're also a very easy to collect faction. Most of it can come in one big Code 1 box, or there's also the smaller action pack if you want to get started there. But either way, it's all quite generally available, and if you want to go all in, there's an option to do that as well. Another big bonus is that they can effectively ignore hacking, if that's not something you're interested in, or if you just want a simpler on-ramp into the game. A lot of other PanOcean sectorials rely a lot more on heavy infantry, and need hacking to protect them, but in Svalheima you can build your lists in a way that they're still going to be quite good and quite successful in what they do, but they don't need to pack any hacking. Kestrel Colonial Force is another pretty decent pick if you're a newer player. They're just sort of having a rollout now and are quite strong and still have a way to build them where there's a simple game plan, but they're not as straightforward. They have a few different sort of synergy interactions and pieces, a lot more equipment you're going to have to keep in mind, and all of your best gunfighters are all hackable, which means hacking is a must, and you yourself need to bring that hacking. So Svalheima, in comparison, is going to take a bit of pressure off in that respect. You can run lists without any heavy infantry, still be very successful, not have to keep a big mental load of equipment in mind, and then run in, have some fun with close combat units. And then Military Orders, a very popular new player faction that can prove to have some, I guess, points of frustration for newer players, where Military Orders, they lack a lot of common tools that many other factions have, and can be pretty punishing to start as a new player, where hacking becomes a really big vulnerability, but it's very expensive to plug that vulnerability, and can make, the dream of running those knights forward and going chop, 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 not as fun as you'd want it to be. Next up, we've got Yu Jing, who's the second major superpower in Infinity, and represents kind of the future of the Asian powers. They're a true jack-of-all-trades factions that interacts well with every element in the game. Quite strong shooting, quite strong close combat, good hacking, camouflage, any aspect of the game that's there. Yu Jing probably has its pinky in a pie somewhere, doing a pretty okay job at it. Aside from that focus on being able to interact with most areas of the game, they've also got a heavy infantry and big gun focus. A lot of the best and coolest heavy infantry lives in Yu Jing, and a lot of them are touting quite devastating weapons. They're adaptable on the table and in list building, where you can kind of lean into any of these different jack of all trade aspects to really make your list excel in one or two areas. But they've got very few sort of apex units that will define a list, like other factions can have access to. So, what do we recommend for starting Yu Jing? We recommend White Banner. They're a very easily understood army with very intuitive tools for list building and for play, where some of the other Yu Jing sectorials can be a bit more opaque in where your tools are and what units do what. They've got a very simple fire teams chart, which can be of benefit to a new player, where really there's two major fire teams and then a very intuitive and cool monk fire team. So putting your units together, it's not going to be a struggle. You're going to be able to slam a bunch of different combinations together that sound cool and fun to you. They're very easy to collect sectorial as well. They're sort of the counterpart to Svalheima, where they were released at the same time. So if you pick up any of the Code 1 boxes or the Yu Jing collection pack, it's mostly going to be White Banner. So it's very easy to collect, very easy to get into, and the last thing I'll say that's about White Banner that's quite good, they've got a very indirect play style in their defense. A lot of the time, Infinity can be very punishing going second if you set up your defense wrong. If you put too much up, your opponent can shoot it all down, and you've lost too much to then make a decent push. But if you don't put enough up, something can break into your deployment zone, hack you up. It's a big problem. But White Banner takes a lot of stress out of the defensive process. They've got, very, very good tools for keeping your opponent at arm's reach without exposing yourself too much with Gudan and Long Ya. But if those units do get caught out and do go down, it's not the end of the world at all. They're a minor aspect of the list, and it doesn't hurt too much, but will always buy you that first turn. So aside from White Banner, you've got ISS, who are a recent sort of release, but they've got quite complicated interactions. If you want to get the result going from A to B, can be a little more complicated with ISS, and they've got pretty opaque list construction. They don't list build or play like a normal Infinity faction, and that can be really hard to wrap your head around as a new player when you're barely even understanding how to build a standard Infinity list, let alone an ISS list. And then another heavy infantry faction, like Military Orders, that attracts a lot of new players, Invincible Army. They're a lot better than they used to be, but they're quite challenging to pilot for a new player. Again, some of their list building is a bit opaque. They've got some pretty glaring aspects that you need to be aware of when you do pilot them that can be quite hard for new players to get a hold of. Next up, Ariadna. These guys are sort of the future Europe that got blasted into space and covers, a pretty wide range of kind of the European and even the American powers. And they're a very aggressive faction that relies on hidden information to get the upper hand, with camouflage markers being sort of their main calling card. They're very focused on light skirmishers in the midfield and in their deployment zone, who can deliver a much bigger punch than they can take. But they completely ignore the hacking game, which can be fantastic for a new player starting out who doesn't want to deal with all that hacking system just starting out. And the camouflage aspect means you can protect a lot of your valuable assets and don't have to worry about them getting overrun in your first turn without you getting a shot at cracking off a few volleys. But once something's revealed, it's generally quite fragile. So starting off with Ariadna, I'd recommend the Tartary Army Corps, or TAC. They play in a very intuitively Ariadnan way, with lots of camo markers in the midfield and in their deployment zone, while maintaining a very strong direct combat potential, with veteran Kazakhs and Frontoviks being able to put up really good face-to-face rolls, Spetsnaz as well, but you get to keep that cool, midline skirmisher aspect with conductors, with Bursuks, with Strelocks, that keeps you feeling really Ariadnan, keeping that shell game alive. And you've got a lot of very cool units like Tank Hunters as well, which feel very Ariadnan. You've got units with very clear roles as well. Your gunfighters are very clearly your gunfighters, and they're usually nice and lean. That's the same with your objective runners, with your defensive pieces. Everything really makes sense, everything's very intuitive, and everything's very lean. When you get a profile, you're getting exactly what you need out of that profile. There's not going to be much bloat there. They're also very easy to collect. The TAC Action Pack is still being manufactured and is still a fantastic place to start the faction from. And they've got very strong ablative defense, like we discussed with White Banner. You can put up a defense where you're not going to lose any major units. You're not going to risk getting run over, which can be, really fun, lead to some good dynamic games where you're not worried about losing on deployment. Cosmoflot, it's another pretty good pick, and one that you can consider as well. They've got slightly inferior direct gunfighting, but they can rely on piloting some linchpin units, that if those units go down, the list can sort of fall apart. So there's a bit more pressure on your play with Cosmoflot, where you get a bit more breathing room with TAC. And then US Ariadna, they're a faction that's sort of unclear where they are at the moment in terms of still being supported, and they lack a lot of tools that you'd want as a new player, just starting out, even in an Ariadnan standard. Next up, Haqqislam, which is a very unique faction focused on asymmetric warfare, and represents kind of the future Middle East surrounding the religion of Islam, and going forward into Haqqislam. So they've got a very unique focus on asymmetric warfare, doing a lot of fighting very indirectly and getting little advantages from units you wouldn't expect in ways you wouldn't expect either. They're very focused on infiltrating specialists to complete the mission, and then scalpel units, putting assassins right outside your opponent's deployment zone, or cheap, irregular units who can make an opening and trade up with units much more important than they are. They've got very strong hacking, high willpower, access to pitchers to extend your repeater network, and very powerful doctors, usually getting up your units on 17s and really high numbers like that. But they are very fragile, usually one wound, usually low to no armor, and yeah, many you won't get the chance to doctor because they'll just explode and fly off the field. If you're wanting to start Haqqislam, I'd really highly recommend Rama Task Force. They've got access to a wide variety of tools and units that are very easily understood in a faction that's, otherwise you have to somewhat rewire your brain to play if you're switching to Haqqislam from another faction. They've got really flexible fire teams and list building, where most of the units in the lists go together in some way. They've got kind of two major fire teams, like in the White Banner setup, where you've got your light infantry fire teams, and then your medium to heavy infantry fire teams. And from there, it's really easy to mix and match something that works for you, that sounds cool to you. And they can reliably make really positive face-to-face engagements with minimal setup. A lot of what other Haqqislam sectorials do is they can get those positive face-to-faces where you feel like, you can win this gunfight, but it can take a lot of setup, or it has to be done in a way that feels very unintuitive and quite complicated for a new player. But Rama is very happy to take a direct gunfight with something like a Zayadin, or able to take a direct gunfight with very minimal setup, like throwing smoke in front of a visor. So Rama Task Force, it's a really great place to start if you wanted to start Haqqislam. You've got Assassin Baram as one of the other sectorials, and they've had a recent release. They're a very popular one, but they can be a very complex and punishing entry point into the game. Playing Assassins, it's almost like you're playing a different game and not really playing Infinity. You've got some early moves you need to make, scalpeling important pieces with your Fides, setting up defenses with lots of irregular units that can put pressure on your active turn. But if you really like Assassins, and a lot of people do, dive right in, but just be aware, it might be a bit hard to get started. Then you've got Capokalki, who are beloved. I absolutely love Capokalki, but they are uber jank. Understanding Capokalki and getting a grip with Capokalki is going to be another pretty hard task that you might bounce off if you're a new player. So in this case, I would really recommend sticking to Rama if they interest you at all. They're a really cool faction, mostly focused around light infantry and genetically enhanced super soldiers, which is a really cool aspect to see come out on the table. Next up, we've got the Nomads. They're a very dominant hacking-focused faction, really leading into the info war, extending the range of their hacking potential, getting the most out of the hackers and units they do have. They've got really good vision control and the ability to capitalize on that vision control. You've got white noise, you've got visors with lots of smoke, lots of ways to engage the enemy on your terms, and they've got very unique individual units. Most factions have a unit that is very unique to them in either kind of a unique combination of things or has a unique mechanic that can really make them feel radical and fresh, but they've got a big lack of redundancy uh, just with their list building, and they're not great at reconstitution. They can quickly run out of resources due to SWIC pressure from hacking devices, etc. If you're wanting to start with Nomads, I'd really recommend Bakunin. They're a great place to start. Their units are generally very durable and forgiving, so if you're putting up a unit on defense, chances are, even if you've made a mistake with deployments, or they're not quite in the right spot or quite have the right matchup, they can usually survive one or two bad engagements and keep kicking. They've got very intuitive and powerful fire teams. If you're playing a specific kind of unit, all of that unit goes together, and that's really groovy. If you're playing a different kind of unit, all of that unit goes together, and generally the units that are going in those fire teams are able to take a hit and able to dish a hit back out really well. They're also very easy to collect. The Reverend Moira action pack that came out recently is a really good place to start. You've also got a lot of really cool, unique single units and blisters, like the Stigmaton of the Observance and the Chimera. Tunguska is also a really good place to start, but some key units can be a bit of a pain to get a hold of. The Grenzer multi-sniper specifically, I know, is a bit of a pain to get, as are some of the other bits and bobs in the factions. So if you just want to hit the ground running, don't want to worry about where you're going to get your individual units from, definitely go for Bakunin. Great place to start. Krigador's there as well. They're a very fun faction, and a faction that are very, very close to my heart. But in N5 currently, they can be pretty frustrating to build and pilot, where you've got a lot more restrictions on you than in other Nomad sectorials, where you're not necessarily getting the most out in return for that frustration. Next up, we've got Combined Army. These are the alien invaders of Infinity and play a really pivotal role in the story as the main antagonists for any of the human factions. They're a very top-heavy power faction with a fist for every problem, whether that fist be in close combat, in their hacking networks, or in their guns. They have a lot of specialized skills and equipment entirely unique to the faction that you won't see in any other faction. These include powerful lieutenant skills, powerful ammo types and pieces of equipment, and lots of very unique upgrades to what would other be standardized equipment. They've got strong units in every category, kind of lending from these specialist skills and equipment, where you've got very strong hackers, very strong warbands, very strong objective play, great gunfighters, and they've generally got a pretty high durability and a real potential to snowball if you can get an early lead or get your foot in the door. If you're wanting to start with Combined Army, Morad Aggression Force is definitely the place to start. They really excel in direct combat while maintaining a really high standard of tools and technology. When you take Morats, you're getting great combat potential, but you're not sacrificing hacking or objective play or speed to do so. You've got a very strong overall game plan and a well-rounded faction, and you also don't have to worry much about your command structure or isolation, as all of your Morat units have the Warhorse ability, which means if their lieutenant goes down, they really don't care. It also takes a bit of pressure off in the hacking game as well, where the main program you're scared about in the hacking game for your heavy infantry is that isolation. So it takes a lot of mental load and pressure off of protecting individual units and knowing sort of what matchups go where. And they're also very easy to collect. The action pack for the Morad Aggression Force is a great action pack to pick up, full of really useful models, and they've had a number of recent releases over the past few years that can help you easily put a really good army together. Onyx Contact Force are another army that's quite good, but they are very complex to get set up with, and they're also a bit on the harder side to collect. They haven't had kind of a big box in a while, so you're more kind of picking through different bits and bobs, but they've got a very cool kind of combined arms feel there, where you get a few Morat units, a few units from everywhere. So if you're enjoying Morats, they could be a nice expansion point, but might be a bit hard to start off with. And then, ugh. And then the Sheshvasti, they just sort of suck. There's no real way around it. They've had a bit of a rough point into N5, and they'd be a really hard place to start. Might not be the most positive environment to try and get your games in, try and learn what you can about the game. Very, very underwhelming and punishing sectorial to play. So I'd be sticking with more at Aggression Force. Really, really cool army. Alright, and next up we have Aleph, a very high-tech faction who excel in the InfoWar hacking game and long-range combat. They're home to a lot of very strong characters with unique skills, and a lot of Apex units that can really linchpin a list and put the fear of God in your opponent. They've got a really fun interplay and synergy between units, and maximizing that synergy is what's going to get you the most out of your Aleph lists and make you feel very big brain. They've got a lot of really fantastic specialists. Most of the time they're quite durable and really excel in the role they do, so you're never going to have someone wanting for pressing a button. For Aleph, I'd really recommend Steel Phalanx. They've got very hard to hit and forgiving units, and they've got very strong order generation and line troops that let their really star units shine and let those Apex units and character units really get to work. They're very easy to collect and to kind of keep a small collection as well. You need very few units to really get a really good Steel Phalanx list going, with a very small amount of units. So if you're looking sort of just to maybe dip your toes in Infinity and test the water, Steel Phalanx is a really great faction for that. And they also just absolutely kick ass. They've got a very cool feeling to them. Lots of really good shooting that kind of leads into kind of close combat assaults, long range stuff. There's not much that Steel Phalanx doesn't do, and feel really good while doing it. And OSS as the other option, they're just not Steel Phalanx. They're a bit harder to collect. They don't quite excel in the same ways that Steel Phalanx does, and always sort of just feel a little bit of a step behind Steel Phalanx. Not a bad place at all to start, but I think Steel Phalanx is a really standout faction if you're a new player wanting to get into the game. Next up, O12. They're a very high-tech faction that can really bring the entire toolbox to a list, while other factions, might have the tools in their faction. Fitting it all in can sometimes be a bit of a challenge, but that's not the case for O12. You can come to a game knowing that you've got a tool to solve every problem, and you've got a purpose-built model made for every role that can unpick whatever your opponent's got staring back at you. They've got a minor focus on non-lethal weapons, which are actually quite strong in Infinity N5, as they ignore a lot of defensive tech, and they've got an absolutely fantastic command structure where you can really make really good use out of your lieutenants, and you can look at my lieutenant video on the channel for more information on that, while not worrying about the consequences of losing that lieutenant. I'd really recommend Torchlight Brigade if you're wanting to start with O12. They're a very durable heavy infantry faction that were really the first heavy infantry faction to succeed in feeling very heavy, feeling very strong, but also not feeling too weak to the hacking, as they've got generally very high defense against hacking and a lot of tools to overcome those weaknesses. They've got a very hard to punish command structure with really cheap chain of command and also very durable lieutenants who are really going to use those extra lieutenant orders to put the fist down on your opponent. They've got a very strong variety of defensive options, and you can really choose how to put up that defense. And Moonraker is just being such a staple unit, going to make it really hard for your opponent to directly advance on you. And they've got very unique power pieces in units like the Wrecker, in units like Hippolyta, who are very special, feel really cool to use, and are devastating when they can land that hit. Starmada is also a really good jumping off point as well. They've got some really good fire teams and focus kind of more on that light infantry side, but they're a bit harder to collect. The products around Starmada don't necessarily give you what you need to have a very good starting force. And they've got more of a focus on that non-lethal weaponry, which can be a little unintuitive if you're a newer player, not really understanding kind of what the advantage is there, when it should be used, when you need to bring a bullet out. Can be a bit harder to sort of wrap your head around. Then we've got JSA. They're a really interesting mix of heavy infantry brawlers, rapid engagement units, and very specialized hidden units. Their heavy infantry is generally pretty cheap and cost effective, and you've got really good light infantry that back up that heavy infantry with really good skills and specialized bits and bobs that are going to make those heavy infantry assaults shine. They're really quite good in close combat, and also quite good at getting to close combat in the first place, which can be a bit of a challenge for other armies. And as always, they've got an amazing aesthetic which draws a lot of players in, but they can be a bit of a challenging faction to wrap your head around, because they do play quite differently to most other Infinity factions. If you're wanting to start with JSA, I'd recommend picking up Shinden Butai. They've got a very kind of fun and varied aspect to them, where they're maintaining that aspect of JSA with the cool ninjas and the samurai, while presenting a force that can be played in a more typical N5 manner. You still have the cool samurai, you still have the cool heavy infantry, but you can also take one or two, direct gunfighting units who can break down a wall if you can't quite sneak past it. They've got very advanced technology with plasma weapons, disco balls, pitchers, which are pieces of equipment that aren't generally available and are pretty unique within JSA itself. And look, they're currently having a retail rollout, so collecting them's going to be pretty easy. They've got a lot of new, very exciting sculpts coming out. You can see a couple of sculpts on screen now that are very recent, as CB, the company who makes Infinity, is kind of, making more and more models. The stuff they're coming out with keeps getting crisper, keeps getting cooler. So having a current retail rollout really benefits Shinden Butai. Oban's also really cool, and they're a very funky army, but they can be challenging for a new player starting out because they don't list build or play like a normal Infinity faction, and they can also feel a little unintuitive to get a grip on, to get your head around. So if you're looking to start JSA, Shinden Butai is the right place to go. Then you've got some of the other factions. You've got a whole pile of mercenary factions, which I really don't recommend if you're starting out as a new player. They're usually pretty hard to collect, as they're made up of kind of piecemeal mercenary units, and then seemingly random bits and bobs from other factions if you're not familiar with the game. So they can be pretty hard to collect. And then once you have collected them, they're generally a bit more challenging to get wins out of on the table than the standard factions. But if you're really, really drawn to the mercenary factions and the idea of playing a mercenary faction, I'd highly recommend White Company. They're a bit easier to collect and really don't suffer as much on the table as some of the other mercenary factions like Druze or Akari. And if you're wanting to start with Toha, I would just say good luck with that. They're really complicated, and the models are basically impossible to find, but best of luck, Toha to the moon. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you're able to find something that interests you in this video, and if any factions did stand out to you, I've most likely covered them somewhere else on the channel in more depth and with example lists as well if you're wanting to start out. So thanks once again for watching. Share with some friends, like the video, comment. Really, really supports me and helps me keep going. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.